Welcome to Straight from the Horse's Mouth radio show. I'm Paula Slater, your host. Straight from the Horse's Mouth radio show is an interview-based show where I have conversations with some of the most creative and interesting people in the horse world. Today I'd like to welcome Amanda Pratt from the Equine Connection. It's a therapeutic riding program near Toronto. And welcome, Amanda.
Thanks for having me.
All right. I was wondering if you could tell me how you got started in this.
Absolutely. It's actually a bit of a story.
Good.
I was going to school for public relations, completely unrelated to what I'm doing now. And I wasn't quite sure how I was going to marry all of my passions. And I've always loved horses. I never really had the opportunity to ride all that much as a kid. But I knew as soon as I was kind of off on my own and had the financial means, I was going to get one of my own for sure. So I did a bit of research when I was in school, and I realized that I could work with horses and help people at the same time. And from there, once I graduated, I started volunteering. I became an instructor at a facility. And when the facility shut down, I decided that I wasn't going to shut down what I was doing. So I bought a couple of horses and I started up on my own.
Wow. And did you have an arena or?
At our previous facility, we did have an indoor arena, but right now I've got a dressage arena, an outdoor round pen, and about 200 acres of trail access.
Wow, super.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I think it would be a good idea to talk about therapeutic riding, what it is, the aim, the benefits, that sort of thing.
Sounds good. Therapeutic riding is where you're using the horse for physiotherapy. Generally, it's for children with disabilities, but I also work with adults. And I work with a lot of kids who are on the autism spectrum. So you get the physical motion of the horse, and then there's the added bonus of developing bonds and relationships with the horses, the instructor, the volunteers, and kind of anyone else who's around at the farm. So it's a lot of really good stimulation for people who wouldn't necessarily get it when they're on their own.
Mm-hmm. Now, physically, I think a lot of people, including me, we're not aware. I remember reading something about a person who was riding an adult, and had some difficulty with, had a spinal injury, and riding, just walking at the ride, helped him. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. You wouldn't believe how much stimulation that you get when you're riding. Did you know that for every minute that you're riding, we make approximately 110 muscle adjustments?
No, I didn't.
It's pretty good physiotherapy if you think about it, and it's definitely a lot more fun than sitting in an office and having to push your foot against someone else's arm.
Mm-hmm. And this person was able to, advance, regain some mobility. And again, that was really surprising. I found this out about a couple of years ago, and I thought, wow, no one really knew about this.
Mm-hmm. It's very true. Therapeutic riding is getting a lot more attention now, but it's been around since the 50s, actually. There was an Olympic dressage rider, and no one really found out until afterwards that she'd had polio and was in a wheelchair. But she got the silver medal that year. I think it was in Helsinki. And it was just pretty amazing. So ever since then, it's been gaining some momentum, but it's only within the last 10 years or so that people are really embracing animal-assisted therapies.
Now, why do you think that is?
I'm not really sure. It's always been, I guess, labeled as an alternative therapy. People were more comfortable with the traditional forms, because if you think of horses, I mean, they're large animals. Some of them can be difficult to control or difficult to work with. And if you think of someone with a disability, you don't necessarily automatically, you don't necessarily think that that's a really good combination.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But when you see something as dramatic as some of the recovery and what people are doing, what's happening, it's sort of surprising in a way, because there are a number of very good I would call them, or we used to call them, school horses, but there's some breeds like the Haflinger that are stars in the therapeutic riding area.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, talk to me about the children with autism. What are the benefits for them?
You've got a number of different benefits that they get. There is the physiotherapy side of things, so it's a form of activity and it's a lot of fun. There's also actually vocal stimulation that goes on with that, because when you're riding, your abdominal muscles are stimulated, your lungs are obviously stimulated. The more you work, the more you're going to have to work and focus on your breathing. And I've actually had clients who don't produce spontaneous speech unless they're on a horse. It's just that movement of the horse makes it so much easier for them to talk by themselves, as opposed to repeating whatever it is that you said to them. So in addition to that, I mean, there is the social aspect of riding. There's going out and being independent, getting your own horse, bringing your horse into the barn, being able to groom them, tack them up by yourself, or with minimal volunteer support, depending on the client. And then there's interacting with the volunteers that are helping out, with myself as the instructor, with anyone else who might be on the farm, and with other horses that are around as well. So it's quite the social stimulation that's going on there, as well as just the physical.
And how have you found some progression in terms of advancement for the clients?
Yes, for sure. I mean, I structure my activities based on whatever it is that the client needs. So I will discuss with the parents, with any therapists who are involved, and then with the client themselves as to what they kind of want to work on. So we could be working on something like number recognition, letter recognition, spelling. I have a bunch of foam letters, and we'll lay them out around my arena in a different order, and we have to go around the arena once and then stop your horse at a letter, stop them at the next one, and spell out a certain word. Or we can be doing things that are hand-eye coordination. It really depends on what the client needs.
Now, speaking of clients, how are they receiving this? How do they respond?
Very well. It's definitely a lot more fun than a traditional form of therapy. So I have clients who will have meltdowns if they're in a more sterile environment, I guess. But when they come to the barn, it's, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, I want to go, I want to see these ponies.
Oh, that's great. Now, do they make some progress in terms of their abilities?
Yes, for sure.
Can you talk about that, or tell us maybe about a case story that you could share?
Yes, there was one boy. I'm not able to work with him anymore, unfortunately. His allergies have gotten so bad. But when I started working with him, his verbal communication skills were relatively minor. He was able to say one word at a time and kind of point at whatever it was that he wanted. So we were working on getting him to just speak more. So we did a lot more kind of physiotherapy-based activities. We're working the muscles, working on his trunk muscles, getting him to do a lot of kind of spinning around on the horse. He loved to do around the world. Absolute favorite game. He'd go 3 times each direction at the end of every lesson. To the point where all my volunteers and myself were getting dizzy, but he just wanted to keep going.
Now, maybe for people who don't ride, you could explain what that is.
Okay. You start facing forwards in the saddle, and then you swing one leg over to the side until you're facing sideways, swing another leg until you're facing backwards on the horse, swing another until you're facing the other side, and then swing around back to the front. And so it's just getting him to move around on that saddle and work on his coordination.
Right.
So by the end of our 20 weeks of sessions, he was able to make 3 or 4 word sentences, which was pretty impressive for him. So he was able to say, I want dog, or I want ball, instead of just ball and pointing at it.
Excellent. Now, was he able to retain this?
Yes, absolutely. He does it to this day.
Right.
His language skills have actually progressed further.
Oh, that is wonderful. That is wonderful. Now, how many times on average would a client come to the facility?
Generally speaking, I see them once a week. And for my clients with the physical disabilities, we can only really ride during the spring, summer, and fall. Just because in the winter, their muscles are too cold, they'll be too stiff, and I run the risk of doing more damage than good if I try to get them on a horse.
Yes, good point. Yeah.
So I'll be seeing them once a week for roughly 5, maybe 6 months, depending on how good the weather is. My clients who are on the spectrum, on the other hand, I've had some of them riding with me all year. Minus 20, and they still want to come ride.
Oh, great. Isn't that super? That
It
is
is.
wonderful. Yeah.
I do have a personal rule, though, that we don't ride once it gets below minus 15. It's just too cold.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 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 Now, what about the adults? Can you talk about that a bit?
Yep, absolutely. Some of my clients I've actually been seeing since they were 15, and now they're adults at this point. I've been seeing them for 6 or 7 years, actually, for one. So with the adults, it, again, depends on their needs. I have a few who are on the autism spectrum, but they're what you would call lower functioning. So their communication skills aren't quite there. Their motor skills need a lot of work. So it's the same kind of activities that I was doing when we started with them. It's just we'll progress them more as time goes on. And I mean, I make sure that you're an adult. I treat you like an adult. Just because I started with you when you're 15 and you're now 22 doesn't mean I'm going to keep treating you like you're 15.
Now, what kind of background training have you had for this therapeutic riding?
I am a member of the Canadian Therapeutic Riding Association. It's called CANTRA. So they have a certification process, and there's 3 different levels for it. There's the assistant instructor, where you can teach one-on-one, the intermediate instructor, when you can teach a group of up to 4, and then the instructor level, where you're fully certified and able to teach other instructors and able to guide other people along. So I have my assistant instructor level, and I'm working on the intermediate at the moment.
And you're also an equine assisted growth and learning associate.
Yes.
Correct? Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are a different kind of session, so they're only done from the ground. And it's looking at the horse as a member of a therapeutic team. So depending on what it is that the client wants to work on or needs to work on, we can be doing things like developing confidence, working on self-esteem issues, even teaching something like leadership. For example, last summer I did a workshop, a half-day workshop for women on learning how to set boundaries. So some of the activities that we did where we got 4 jump poles and we set them up in a square in the middle of our grass arena. And the object of this task was to get one of the horses to stand in that square for, I think we said 5 seconds. And you had to label whatever it was that was going into the box. So what we were trying to do anyway, I should probably mention the important part about this task was you couldn't touch the horse and you couldn't use any equipment. So
okay, just go over that again. The objective was to
get the horse to stand within this box that we had built for 5 seconds.
Okay. And this is all, the human is on the outside?
Yes.
Is it one person or the team?
It was a team.
Okay.
And
so they're standing, just paint us a visual picture here with your words.
Absolutely. I can send you some pictures, actually. We took quite a few at that workshop.
That's okay. I'm just saying for now, just so that when we're listening, we can get an idea. So the people are around the square box?
Yep.
And the horse is in the middle?
They're trying to get the horse into the middle because it's in a large grass arena. So
without touching the horse.
Without touching the horse, they have to try and guide the horse into this box. So the general, it's pretty complicated. And I picked my horse, Tequila, who has some issues with dominance. If you try and dominate her, she's not going to put up with it. So we had people coming to us to this workshop where they said, I need to work on how to say no. I don't know how to say no at work or in my personal relationships with my family. I can never say no. And my mare Tequila will not put up with this. She is not afraid of saying no. So the people who are coming to this workshop, they're trying to get her in. We're using all sorts of different techniques. They were trying to, walk up behind her and kind of shoo her in. They were trying to clap and make loud noises and get her to go in. And what eventually ended up happening was the best way to get her to go in there was to walk in with her. And that was a huge breakthrough for a number of the women in this group because they realized they labeled my horse issues. So they were trying to contain their issues within this box, and she kept walking out of the box. So there was just a huge metaphor there for them to realize that maybe I need to kind of work with these issues and figure out a different way to handle them as opposed to just trying to box them up.
And then if you can translate that into working with people, other people, let's say the woman is working with a partner.
Yep, absolutely. I guess the extension for that metaphor would be that you can't necessarily try one approach to any kind of an issue that you might have with someone else. I mean, you need to just keep working together, ideally, to come up with a solution to your problem, as opposed to just keeping on trying the same thing over and over and over again and then getting frustrated when it doesn't work.
Excellent. That's great. Now, the other thing with them, the EAGALA group, is that they do also work with companies and staff members. Have you ever had a group from a company or...
I haven't done any corporate groups yet. I am planning on doing one this summer. We're going to have to see if it actually comes together, though. My partner is actually in Israel for most of the school year. She's a teacher over there, and then she comes here for the summer because that's where her family's from. So we're going to do our best to get that moving. And we're also planning a confidence building and a trust building workshop this summer.
That sounds great. Yeah, I think that this this kind of therapy is ideal for staff members, let's say at a school, or in work, who are working together. That that horses can help them learn how to interact with each other in a very positive way.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, horses are extremely sensitive, and they can read what we call micro cues. So it's body language, tone of voice. It's things that we give off that we don't even realize we're giving off. But horses are so acutely sensitive to these kinds of things because it's necessary for their survival that they pick up on it and they react to it even if we don't realize we're doing it.
Now, when you picked your horses to work with people, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yep, absolutely. I keep in mind the abilities of the person, whether it be physical or horse handling, or I guess the stress capabilities to a certain extent, because I do have some clients with very high anxiety issues, so I don't necessarily want a very reactive horse to be with them.
Yes.
And for riding, my go-to horse is Noble. He's my big Palomino boy, and he's featured all over my website. He is fantastic with the kids, fantastic with adults. He's 22 years old now. He loves his job, and I usually let people kind of meet him, get used to horses in general, how to handle them, grooming, just meeting them, being okay with them, and then I'll introduce them to the rest of the herd.
Now, how long are your sessions?
The riding sessions are about 50 minutes in total. And depending on the capabilities of the rider, you're riding from a half an hour to 45 minutes. As I do include grooming and catching your horse and tacking up as part of the lesson. It is pretty important.
Yes.
I don't really believe in these programs where you show up, you're plopped on a horse for an hour, you go around in a circle for an hour, and then you come off.
Right. Yes.
I mean, there needs to be a bond there. There needs to be a relationship.
Right. And part of horses is the interaction, from the ground.
Exactly.
Definitely. Now, I was going to ask you about how much assistance do some riders need? So if you were looking at a child with autism, I know that they have volunteers, walkers, and so on. What does that look like? If we were to walk in and see one of your clients, on a horse.
Depending on their physical capability, I'll have anywhere from one volunteer just leading the horse and then the client sitting independently to as many as 4 supporting them. I had a client who had cerebral palsy and his trunk muscles were very weak, so he actually wasn't able to sit up independently on the horse for the first few sessions. So I had 2 volunteers on each side supporting him at the thigh and supporting him in his shoulders so that he could still walk and get that muscle stimulation, but he didn't have to force himself to sit up.
Right. Now, can you talk about that particular person? How did they progress? That's I've heard that again that riding really does help them.
Yep, absolutely. He was riding with me for 2 years, and then he went off to university.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end of our sessions, he was riding pretty independently. We had one person leading the horse, and I had one side walker just beside him to kind of talk him through. He did tend to get anxious at times.
Yes.
And just to kind of place a hand of support either on his ankle or on his thigh just above his knee, not to actually put any pressure, but just to kind of give him that feeling of support, even though he didn't need it.
Right. So at the end of his sessions, he had progressed quite a bit.
Yes, definitely.
Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. When he came to me, he was wheelchair bound. He was not able to get out of it. And by the time he'd finished, he was using his walker and taking around 20 steps before he got really tired. So it was pretty amazing to see that.
Right. Now, did he sort of finish, or has he come back at all?
He hasn't come back because he's in university. He's very busy, and he's got himself a girlfriend now. So girls come before horses.
True.
Yep.
Now, the thing is, though, he could come back to the riding again if he's finding that his core muscles aren't as strong.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
As they were. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so Amanda, I'd like to ask you about the cost of a lesson, and if the government does any subsidizing or what's available for people.
My riding lessons are currently only one-on-one, and for a private 1-hour session, it's $50. As far as government funding goes, I do have a few clients with passport funding. So that is a funding for people who are on the autism spectrum to kind of get out into the community, be more involved, and just be involved in activities, basically. But I believe it's restricted to people who are 18 or over.
Oh.
I do know of a few private funding opportunities as well. There's the Jennifer Ashley Children's Foundation. They do offer funding to families for either equipment, assistive devices, or community activities. And in certain instances, therapy, so this would fall under the therapy category. As well, the President's Choice Children's Fund offers $500 a year renewable funding for families for assistive devices, equipment, or therapy. And funding for that usually goes until the child turns 17.
Now, is there a time limit, you just answered that question, but I'm going back to the government funding. Is there a time limit on that?
It really depends on what agency is administering the program. For example, I have 2 clients who have passport funding. One is from Mississauga and one is from Orangeville. The one in Orangeville, it's a yearly program that ends at the end of March, and then it's renewed for the next year. The only catch is you have to use all of the money that they give you. If you don't, then they don't renew your funding.
I see.
So there's usually quite the scramble in February and March to use up the last of the money. Seems a little backwards, but okay. And then my client in Mississauga, theirs is, I believe, in 3 month chunks, and then they can just apply again for it to be renewed. So it really depends on what agency is actually administering the funds.
So if a parent had a child that they wanted to get into therapeutic riding, they would go through what agency?
For the most part, it actually depends on where you live.
And that means city, not province, right?
Yeah. City. City for sure. There are a few agencies that actually advertise. For example, if you go on to the President's Choice Children's Fund, they actually have a resources page as to where you can find other sources of funding. Usually the community living organizations will have a resources page that does the same thing. And I know within Peel in particular, there's quite a few children's network groups. So if you were to contact, say, Erin Oak, for example, they're pretty good about having resource pages as to what kind of agencies are out there, what funding is out there, and what different programming you can get for your child based on either their disabilities or what kind of activities you want them to do.
And what about, where would a parent start if they had a child with a disability? Let's say they have cerebral palsy. Their doctor, I would assume, right?
Yep, absolutely. For cerebral palsy, there is the Cerebral Palsy Federation of Ontario. Mm-hmm. So the membership for there, I believe, is $35 a year for a family. That gets you access to any of their resource fairs. They usually have 2 per year. And they have all sorts of listings for resources, funding. They actually offer funding themselves, just you have to be a member to actually get it. But if you pay $35 to get $5,000 worth of funding, it can be worth it.
And what about other agencies?
I would say Autism Ontario is a really good one. They have fantastic outreach on Facebook, plus they have chapters in pretty much every major city around Ontario.
Oh, great.
The Peel chapter actually is having a resource fair within the next couple of weeks. It's going to be down in Mississauga, but I think they have 75 different agencies and kind of businesses that are going to have booths there that offer different resources or different services. They also have links to funding and assistive devices.
Mm-hmm. Now, if a person or parents were looking for a therapeutic riding center, how can they find a center in their area?
There's a few different ways to find one. If you go onto the CANTRA website, so it's the Canadian Therapeutic Riding Association, they have a listing of their accredited centers. Mm-hmm. But for example, because I'm not an accredited center, I'm just a member personally, my center isn't listed on there. So you can also do a general Google search, say type in therapeutic riding Caledon. There's mm-hmm. a few instructors that are independent that are up in this area.
Okay. And now, do you know offhand, is therapeutic riding offered in Canada in all provinces or just a few?
Yep, it's all across Canada.
Oh, super. That's great. That's wonderful. All right. Well, Amanda, if you could give us your URL to your website and then all the other ways that people could reach you, Facebook or any social media, mm-hmm. and maybe your phone number. Okay, maybe start with your URL.
Yep, absolutely. Our website is www.theequineconnection.ca. Mm-hmm. So you got to make sure to have the 2 E's in there.
Okay. And social
media? You can find us on Facebook mm-hmm. Under the Equine Connection Therapeutic Riding and Learning Center. Or myself, I'm Amanda Pratt. I'm associated with the Equine Connection, so you can find me from there. I am, what else am I on? I'm also on Twitter. Mm-hmm. My handle is just Amanda Pratt.
Okay. And your phone number?
It is 647-237-3485. And you can either call or text me on that.
Okay, that's great. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we sign off here?
No, I think we're good. Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on today, Amanda. And we'll say goodbye then.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, that was a really informative interview with Amanda Pratt from Equine Connection. And I hope that you'll check out her website and contact her if you live in the area. And if you don't, there are many therapeutic riding places around. And if you have a need for that, this is a proven therapy that can help children and adults. Wonderful. All right. Well, this is Paula Slater signing off. Remember, the best compliment you can give straight from the Horse's Mouth radio show is to leave a positive review on iTunes.